Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Cutting Edge Figure Skating Podcast. My name is Kim Dunaway, and in this episode, I'll be covering the men's and women's event at the 2024 Grand Prix Final in Grenoble, France. I'll start with the men's event. The winner here was Ilia Malinin of the US. Not a surprise here that he won. He came in as the heavy favorite, and in the short program, he definitely delivered. Free skate was a little bit of a different story, however. He did not win the free skate here, and this is the second time this season that we have seen him not win the free skate. He also lost the free skate to Kevin Amos at Skate America. There, he made some errors. Here, it was a lot of calls, and we definitely had a tougher tech committee for this men's event than I feel like we have seen. And Ilia got calls. We saw Daniel Grassl get some calls. So it definitely affected him here. We'll talk about the short program first. Ilia was sporting new costumes in both of his programs. I didn't think there was an issue with the previous costumes. He did say after his second Grand Prix that he had a new costume for the free skates that he would be debuting at Grand Prix Final. I don't remember him saying anything about the one for the short program. It was fine. I thought the first one was also fine. His short program is definitely my preferred vehicle of his programs this season. He has skated it really well with a lot of emotion, a lot of passion every time that he skated it this season. And this outing here was really no different. He ended up with a Q call on his quadlets, which is what kept him from getting his personal best that we saw him get earlier this season at Lombardia. But he got 105 points in what was a very messy men's short program. So he had a really insurmountable lead coming into the free skate. And this was the event that he decided that he was going to throw in all 6 quads. Now, was this always the plan that he was expecting to do 6 quads at this point in the season? Was this a plan because it was Grand Prix Final? Was this a plan because Mikhail Shadorov was here also doing crazy things in his free skate as well? Don't know. The attempt at 7 quads and then 6 different quads was impressive from a technical aspect, no doubt about it. It definitely came with the expense of his program. He won program components in the short program. He did not win program components here, and nor should he have. It really seemed like he just started zoning in on the jumps. A lot of the jumps weren't even particularly done very well. But he started off with the quad flip, which for last year was the jump that he said was preventing him from doing all 6 quads in a program last year. He was doing the quad loop more consistently then, whereas this season he hasn't done it as consistently in his program content as he did last year, but it was a quad flip, mostly because he had a hip injury and the flip was bothering the hip for him more than the other jumps were, and so he just took it out of his program. This season, we've seen the quad flip pretty consistently and pretty consistently landed for him. So once he started off, he did the quad flip and then he did the quad axel second, which historically, when he's done the quad axel, he's done it right off the bat. So that was interesting. And then he went and did the quad loop, and it was like, okay, he's definitely going for all 6 quads at this point. He falls on the quad lutz after he did the quad axel. And then he did another quad lutz attempt later in the program so that he could check that box and get that quad lutz. He did a triple axel Euler. No, he did a quad Salchow Euler triple axel later in the program. Again, some of the crazy tank content that we have seen from him in the past, but really without the performance. There was also a lot of effort put into a lot of those quads. And so he ended up with a lot of calls. And Skating Scores put out a graphic at the end of the event that showed the number of quads attempted in a program and the number of those quads that got positive GOE. So Ilia had 7 quads attempted in this program, which is the most that we've ever seen. None of them got positive GOE. Quad flip, Q call, quad axel, Q call, quad lutz with the fall, undercall, quad loop, undercall, quad lutz, the second one, undercall, quad toe, Q call, quad Salchow, Q call. So all of his quads got calls, which we've really not seen from Ilia. We've seen here and there, like a Salchow get a call or something like that, but we've not seen that kind of volume of his jumps. Literally all of them get calls from before. And that really affected his tech score because, as I mentioned before on a previous podcast, if you get a Q call on a jump, it's going to affect the GOE. Most of the time, it's going to turn a positive GOE jump into a negative GOE. So it's going to cost you points on every single jump. If you get an undercall, you've lost 30% of the base value of that jump, which can be very costly on jumps that are 9, 11 point value to lose, sometimes close to 3 points just on the base value plus the negative GOE that you're going to get on top of that. So that's how he ends up losing the free skate to Yuma Kagiyama, even though he just had the one fall. And also, like I said, the program didn't have the same impact that it has had at times this season in terms of his performance. I don't love the new costume. Like, I thought the previous costume was fine. I always thought the blood on the sleeves was a little weird, but he's a vampire. This one was interesting. It had like cutouts in the back. Whatever. Just kind of like last year, like I liked his first Succession outfit better than the one that he later in the season. But it seems to be a thing. Like, people like to change their outfits and dresses and costumes, whatever makes them feel more comfortable. Or sure, why not? But definitely not the best that we have seen Ilia skate. But he wins his second Grand Prix final in a row, and I think he still submits himself as the favorite going into Worlds, and frankly, the favorite going into the Olympics. But if you are Yuma Kagiyama, who was second here, you have to feel good about your chances going forward, seeing that the quad god is beatable. He is so beatable. In fact, had Yuma landed his quad Salchow in his free skate, which he popped into a double, he would have won here. And what an interesting upset that would have been. But let's talk about Yuma, who was second here and expected to be second. He had an issue in his short program right off the bat with his quad Salchow, which is usually such a good, consistent, beautiful jump for him. He basically had the jump and just kind of slipped off the edge and fell. That was obviously very costly for him. He still was in second place after the short program. Even with the fall, he still got 93 points and was ahead of a clean Mikhail Shadorov. And then in the free skate, he finally landed that quad flip that has been so pesky for him this season. And then goes into his quad Salchow and pops it into a double, which got him 1.3 points. He got 13.44 points on that element at NHK. So that was a difference of 12 points. And he lost by 11 points. He had one other little mistake late in his program, and that was with his intended triple flip, triple loop combination. Just did a triple flip, double loop combo there instead. But really a pretty brilliant performance from him. Of his two programs, I prefer the short program over the free skate, but I do think the free skate is very well done. It's a very effective vehicle for him still. And he's apparently been working on a quad lutz in practice, but I think this hopefully can show him that he could beat Ilia with the tech content that he has if he's clean with the tech content that he has. Now, it does depend on Ilia making mistakes, right? Like, he can't beat a clean Ilia with the tech content that Ilia can bring. But as we have seen, Ilia is not always going to be clean. And he's not always going to bring out all the heavy artillery that he can bring out. Now, at Worlds, you better believe that he is going to. I wonder if there's going to be extra pressure on Ilia at a home Worlds. Ilia is not a person who ever seems like he's affected by pressure at all, but I do remember him saying at Skate America that he was more nervous than usual. So if you're Yuma Kagiyama's camp, I don't know that I would rush a quad lutz into his program, especially if it's not ready to go yet. Like, just continue to focus on the content that he has and skating that cleanly, because he can get very close to Ilia in the short program if he's clean. And if he can land that quad flip, he can get very close to it also. I've said before, I felt like he needed one more quad somewhere in his free skate, and he could challenge Ilia even if Ilia has 6 quads, which, as we saw here in this event, he had 7 quads, but Yuma can get there because he is stronger in that second component, especially when Ilia is just going to zone in and just jump and not care about it at all. In third place here was Shun Sato. He had to come from behind a little bit. He also had a mistake in his short program, like so many of the men did here. The quadlets, which has been pretty consistent jump for him so far this season, failed him in both the short program and the free skate here. So he ended up with 86 points in his short program, which wasn't terrible, but it put him in 4th place going into the free skate. And outside of that, opening quad Lutz was pretty strong after that. I'm sorry, it wasn't the Lutz, it was the flip. He landed the Lutz in the free skate. It was the quad flip that he fell on in the free skate, which interestingly enough, had he landed the quad flip, if I'm just going to throw scenarios out there, he would have won the free skate here because he was only like 4 points off from Yuma here because he has tremendous tech content in his program as well. And even if you fall on a quad, it's better than popping a quad because you still at least get half the points from that element, whereas popping a quad just gives you almost nothing for that jump. And so the fall, while it was costly, he likely would have been 3rd place anyway. He was about 11 points off of the silver medal position. He wasn't going to make that all up on the quad flip that he fell on. But it certainly would have been nice for him to have won a free skate over Ilia Malinin for sure. He looks very strong. I see absolutely no reason that he won't make the world team. As much as he's been around and we've seen him at 4 continents, this would be his first world berth if he makes it to the world team this year. And I think he absolutely should. And he will be in the conversation for a medal at Worlds because of the tech content and the improvements that he's made in the quality of his skate. I think both of his skates, while very lovely, are a bit boring. I hope he has at least one vehicle next year that's a little bit more exciting, even though he often wouldn't bring a lot of excitement to it. But maybe he will. Getting off the podium, Mikhail Shadorov, who was, of course, a replacement for Adam Co. Himfa of France. After I recorded, it was announced that Adam did, in fact, decide to withdraw from the final, which I thought was absolutely the right choice for him to do, and try to heal up his injured ankle. So Mikhail Shadorov got the opportunity to be here and made the most of it for sure. The short program, I thought he did very strong. I felt like I could see some effort going into the choreography. Great jumps, like that quad toe that he does in the second half of his short program just looks so amazingly effortless. And the free skate, however, felt like we had reverted back a little bit in terms of performance to what we saw from him earlier in the season. It also was not as clean technically. So he has gotten a lot of interest and extra attention from the press for this triple axel quad toe combination that he has done well at both of his Grand Prix this season. This competition, he decided to do a different one and do a triple axel Euler quad Salchow combo, which he landed. Also very impressive, but kind of like with Ilia, I felt like all his attention and focus was on that combo and not so much on the rest of the performance. And his other jumps really suffered as well. He fell on his opening quad Lutz. He also ended up with an undercall on that, which we don't see from him very often. He ended up with an undercall on his quad flip. He also really struggled with some of the other elements in his programs. He had a camel spin that only got a level 1. His step sequence only got a level 2. These are all things that cost him precious points. So in the free skate, he actually finished 6th out of the 6 competitors, and that dropped him down to 5th place. I totally skipped over our 4th place competitor, Daniel Grassl, which probably will be okay with some people. Before I move to Daniel, I have to say one thing about Mikhail. There was an article on Olympics.com, which I will link in the show notes of this episode, talking about him working on that triple axel quad toe combo. This wasn't something that he just like dreamed up in the off season and decided to do. It's something he's been working on for over 2 years. He said he was originally inspired by Shoma Uno, who was doing this in practices but never actually attempted in a competition. And so he's actually been working on it really for some time before putting it into skate. So I thought that was a really interesting article, and I'll link it in the show notes. Okay. Rewinding back to Daniel, who I accidentally skipped over, who was in 4th place here. Again, I think Daniel is probably going to medal at Europeans. He is been looking very strong in all of his skates this season. He took an interesting approach in the short program. So he's completely changed his short program from what he was doing. He was doing maybe it was like a Mozart piece, some kind of classical piece this season. So he came here with a new short program, which has got to be all of 2 weeks old, because we just saw him with his other short program on the Grand Prix, skating to a piece called Human. And he's also decided to up the ante of the technical content in his short program. He was doing a quad loop in the short and then a triple Lutz, triple toe. Here, he opted to do a quad Lutz, triple toe and the solo quad loop. So he was upping the technical ante by quite a bit. It didn't go well for him here. He did not score as good in his short program as he has scored this season with the triple Lutz, triple toe, because he got unders on both of his quads, and he ended up also with a Q on the triple toe. So that affected the GOE, it affected the base value, and so it actually ended up not paying off for him. Now, will it pay off for him later on the season? He continues to keep this tech content, and he's able to get clean rotations on those jumps, maybe. But if he had been getting consistent calls on the quads, I don't know that he would be taking the strategy. I think this is actually sort of the result of him not getting calls on the quads and then him putting them in the short, and now he's getting quads, and so now his team has got to go back and rethink if this is the correct strategy or not. But he did try to go more difficult in the short program here than what he did earlier in the season, and he's got a new short program, which I think is not a bad idea because there's a lot of classical elements in his free skate, and so having it also in the short program was sort of providing a little bit of the same. So this new short program gives him a little bit different look, and I also think it's a style that he can more easily pull off. In his free skate, he attempted 3 quads, so quad Lutz, which you got to undercall, quad loop, which you got to undercall on again, and then a quad Salchow, which was called clean. So while when he finished his free skate, he ended up with over 100 again on that technical score, it did end up going down about 7 points once they took into account those under rotations. But he still got, a good score, over 170 points in his free skate, and it did allow him to move up from 5th place to 4th. And like I said, I think he's definitely in the conversation at Europeans, because remember, Europeans, we're not going to have all the fabulous Japanese skaters. We're not going to have Ilia there. We have no idea what kind of shape Adam's going to be in there, or frankly, Kevin, for that matter, who I haven't gotten to yet. It's likely going to be Daniel, if Lucas is able to get himself healthier and more consistent than what we have seen him earlier this season. Somebody like Alexander Selevko, who medaled at Europeans last year, has looked really a mess this season. He did just get a silver at Golden Spin, but I feel like Daniel is definitely going to be in that conversation for a podium. And if Adam is anywhere not himself, he could be in the conversation for European champion. And wouldn't that be a story? Oh boy. All right. Moving on to our last place competitor here, who I think was my pick to win bronze, and that was Kevin Amos, who fell apart in the short program, and so disappointingly so, in front of his home crowd. He started off with a fall on the quad toe, which Mark said on the commentary he doesn't think he had missed one all practice. And then he immediately fell on his triple axel, which was very deflating to start the program. He ended up in the 60s in his short program and was just completely out of it at that point. In the free skate, he did manage to finish 5th, but still not anywhere near what we've seen from Kevin this season. He did manage to land the quad toe in the free skate, but just a lot of rough landings overall. He's always going to bring the performance, whether he's falling apart or not. But it didn't have the same impact, because I know for me, and I'm sure for some of you, you just immediately start to flash back and get that feeling of deja vu of like, oh, here we go again with Kevin. Like, was it being at home in France? Was it just a fluke? Hopefully it's just a fluke and we get back to Europeans and we see good Kevin again, because I want Kevin to medal at Europeans. He's never medaled at Europeans. Every time when he goes in as some kind of a favorite, it just doesn't happen. So I don't know. It was extremely disappointing after the short program to have that performance. And then I felt like there were signs of life in the free skate, but overall finishing in last place here was not what anybody wanted. I'm sure include himself included. And so we'll see what he does next. All right, let's move on from the men and talk about the ladies. And the winner here was the lone non-Japanese woman, and that was Amber Glenn of the U.S. Coming into the season, Amber Glenn had never won an international event, and now she has won 4. She won Lombardia, both of her Grand Prix, and now has won Grand Prix Final. And Girlfriend has set herself up very nicely, and she has beaten Kaori Sakamoto in both of their 2 head-to-head meetings this year. I hope that she is ready for the onslaught of pressure that is probably going to come her way with the Nationals approaching and a home Worlds. But whatever she did in the off season, like, she needs to bottle it up and probably sell it, because it is so inspiring and so impressive from what we have seen from Amber over the past several years to what we have in front of us right now. And I hope it's inspiring the other skaters who have also struggled, and somebody like Lindsay Thorngren, who has, whether it's under rotations or just not being able to rise up to the occasion in the moment, like, you can do it. Because if Amber can do it, like, I feel like anybody can do it. In the short program, she was definitely tight, but it was a very messy women's short program, and disappointingly so, honestly. But she ended up on top of everyone, which means she skated last. And she skated last after Kaori and Mone Chiba, with all of the pressure of trying to hold on to that first place score. And she absolutely did. That triple axel was rock solid for her in both programs here. The triple flip, triple toe combination was working. Really impressive for her that she held it together in the short program when she was tight, and that she kept it together and put another clean free skate down. The only issue was a 2-footed flip later in the program, so I guess you could say relatively clean free skate, but in Amber's world, like, I'm calling it clean. She got over 140 points. Like, can't really argue with that. She is by far and away the most impressive lady that we've seen in the Grand Prix this season. She's scored over 210 points in every outing that she's had this season. And she looks primed to win another national title in about 5 weeks from now. So we'll see. But I can't say enough superlatives about Amber and the way that she has responded from the disappointment at Worlds last year to where she is right now. In the battle of the Japanese ladies, in second place overall was Mone Chiba. So she comes out of all of the Japanese ladies. And I think it's pretty safe to say that she is in for Worlds at this point. She had a rather disappointing Grand Prix last season and had to really show up at Japanese Nationals to get on the world team last year. I think she would really have to mess up at Japanese Nationals to find herself off of the world team. I think that she's definitely been the most consistent of the Japanese ladies, Kaori included, this season. Honestly, she skated well here, scoring nearly 210 points in her outing, just under 209 points. And she got a few calls here, on her flip in the short program. And I think she got an unclear edge on her Lutz as well, but really strong for her. In third place was Kaori Sakamoto. This was definitely not what I was expecting. I was expecting an Amber and Kaori showdown, and we didn't get it. I kind of felt like I did in the ice dance. We got robbed. Kaori had a rough practice from what we were told, and unfortunately for her, it spilled over into the short program. She, from my understanding, struggled with her triple flip, triple toe in practice, or at least in her run through earlier that day. She got the triple flip off, did the triple toe, and fell on the triple toe. So it was very costly for her. She ended up in 4th place after the short program, but she wasn't out of it because Amber didn't go and knock it out of the park. Had Amber gone and gotten a 78 in the short program like we've seen her get this season and was 15 points ahead, then that would be a very difficult gap for Kaori to close. But we've seen Kaori get 150 points in the free skate. And so being, a little over 6 points behind Amber wasn't crazy for Kaori. That's basically the value of a triple jump with some GOE. But she had just kind of a bit of a struggle with her jumps in general, got some calls on her jumps later in the program, and ended up with only 135 points. Only 135 points. It did pull her up to the podium, but it was not enough to get her on either of the top 2 steps. She has been lights out like she was in NHK, but most of the season, there's been some mistakes in there, uncharacteristic than what we have seen from her in the past. She definitely seems more beatable to me than what we have seen from her. In the past, it's really been like only Luna felt like she was in the stratosphere. And this year, it definitely feels like, obviously Amber is there, but it also feels like Mone could be there too if she skates up to what she's capable of. But that was the podium. Moving on to 4th place was maybe one of the biggest disappointments here, and that was Wakaba Higuchi. Let's talk about this short program because all season she has done her triple lutz, triple toe in the beginning. She does like a double axel to start, and then she'll do her combo, and then she does a triple flip later in the program. And she's gotten an undercall or a Q, a lot of times a Q, on that triple toe, which has affected her ability to sort of get towards that 70-point marker. So she makes a last-minute decision to switch her jump layout and do the triple flip first and to do the triple lutz, triple toe later in the program. Obviously, that's to get the bonus in the second half on that combo. Very risky for me if it's something that you already have problems rotating to do it later in the program on potentially tired legs. Did not work out for her here because while she landed the triple flip, no problem, she gets to the lutz and she falls on the lutz, does not get a combo off, and she ends up with only 61 points and finds herself very behind in 6th place. Now, it was a messy free skate, so again, she was 9 points off the lead, even less points from that off from the podium, but she doesn't have quite the same scoring capability as some of the other ladies do, at least not that we've seen this season. And so putting herself in that deficit was a real bummer for her. She did come back with a vengeance in the free skate, and she pulled herself up to 4th. Still was 4th in the free skate, but she got over 134 points in the free skate. She was clean on all of her elements. Literally, she did not get a Q call on that triple lutz, triple toe, which means she is capable of getting it fully rotated, which she desperately needs in that short program to get her higher up so that she could be in that conversation to medal at Worlds. The only issue at all in her free skate was an unclear edge call on her final jump, which was a triple flip. She had one element that was in a level 3. Everything else was a level 4. So she's pretty close to the top of what she can score. And I love, of course, I've gushed over this free skate all season. And I was really glad to see her really come back and fight and end up on top of the other 2 Japanese ladies here, which I think is very important because I do think that she's probably in the driver's seat to get the 3rd world spot. Because like I said, I think obviously Kaori is going to Worlds, right? I think Mone Chiba looks like a pretty safe bet to go also. Wakaba finishing ahead of the other Japanese ladies here, winning a Grand Prix, definitely puts her in a really good position. But as we've seen, they weight Japanese nationals very heavily, just like they weight the Grand Prix. And so she's still got to show up at Japanese nationals and do well with all of the talent that's there. But for me, if I'm Team Japan, like those 3 ladies, that's my world team right there. Wakaba, Mone, Kaori. If we move on to 5th place, we've got Hana Yoshida, who was in position for a medal after the short program. She was 3rd after the short program. And again, she wasn't perfect on hers either. She got a couple of costly calls on her Lutz and on her loop that only gave her 64 points, but with everybody else being messy, 64 points was good for third. So she found herself going into the free skate in a position to podium, but her free skate just was not strong enough. She did go for the triple axel, which I was not a fan of at Finland because I just felt like she didn't need it and she really needed the win to ensure that she got to Grand Prix final. Here, I think absolutely you do the triple axel. You're in a Grand Prix final situation where you've got to really throw out everything that you've got to try to get on the podium. It didn't work out for her in terms of landing it cleanly. She turned out of it, but it scored better than what a double axel would have scored. She didn't fall on it. I think if she keeps, she's close. She's close to landing it in these couple of last two competitions that we have seen from her, but just too messy on some of the landings, and ultimately, again, costly calls kept her from reaching 130 points, and she was not able to stay in a podium position with a surging Kaori and with a surging Wakaba, and she ends up fifth. I think she's still very much in the conversation because she also won a Grand Prix this season. If she goes and beats Wakaba at Japanese Nationals, I think she goes. I'm kind of the mindset she got to go last year. Rika got to go 2 years ago. It's Wakaba's turn. That's kind of what I'm feeling, but I'm also kind of biased too. I like Hana just fine, but she's just not as strong as a skater as Wakaba has. And arguably our sixth place finisher is the strongest in terms of skating skills and presentation than both of these two skaters, but technically just unfortunately for her wasn't able to get it done here. I said in the preview that if she could skate cleanly in the short program, that she would be very close to a medal position, if not winning a medal, because she has the goods in the free skate if she could just get that short program clean. And she could not. She fell on her triple Lutz later in the program. She also ended up with a full downgrade on it as well. And so she wasn't a lot better off than Wakaba was after the short program. But still, she is somebody who has scored like 130, way high, almost 140 points this season. So I was like, okay, she's going to bring out, everything that she's got in the free skate. And no, again, no falls, but just a lot of costly calls, cues, unclear edges, unders, and she found herself with almost the only free skate that didn't get 130 points. Hana Yoshida also didn't get 130 points, but she was 129.79. She was just so close there that Reno at 126 was way below what we have seen her get this season. Had she scored what we've seen her get this season, she would have been much closer to 200 and could have found herself on the podium here ahead of Kaori with a stronger free skate. But unfortunately, it just wasn't meant to be for her. And I said after the short program that I felt like when she fell on that jump, that there went her world spot. I think it's going to be much tougher for her to find herself ahead of Wakaba, who's been more consistent, and Hana, who's got the triple axel sort of as that X factor. Reno, I think, has probably the best free skate of all of these ladies. But unfortunately, the jumps let her down here. We'll see what happens at Japanese Nationals, but I think it's going to be a little bit tougher climb for her to get a world spot, but I don't think it's crazy for her to get a four continents spot because they oftentimes will have two very different teams for four continents, and they have worlds, or they might have one person that does both, but they'll also give kind of those extra slots. So I would love to see her at four continents if she's not able to make the world's team. All right, so that is it for the ladies. So Pamchenko Awards here, going back to the men. There wasn't really a lot of excitement in the short program outside of Ilia. And then in the free skate, I felt like there wasn't a ton to get excited about either. So I'm probably going to give it to Ilia's short program. Thought that was the strongest performance that we saw in 12 performances for the men. And then for the ladies, I'm going to give it to Amber for that free skate. Just under pressure, with whatever nerves might have been coursing through her veins, just like nerves of steel. It seemed like that she had here, and just could not be more thrilled for what she has become this season. All right. Thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast. I will be back next week, most likely, with a wrap up of the Grand Prix and Challenger season. Now that we've sort of moved on from Grand Prix, there's usually another couple of like challengers later in the season, but definitely not as high profile with as big name competitors as you'll find in the fall season. So I'll definitely be talking about, people to look for as we move into nationals and ISU championship season. I will also have an episode of the top 10 moments of 2024. I do that every single season. Start working on refining my list down to 10 moments after I finish this podcast. You can find me on all the socials at iSkate Podcast. That could Blue Sky, X, Threads, Instagram, YouTube. Feel free to also send me a line at thecuttingedgepod@gmail.com. I hope you enjoyed Grand Prix. I hope you enjoyed also some of the Junior Grand Prix, which was also super fun. And that's all I got, guys. Take care.